welcome everyone. So at Siemens we have the Fabio, and then we figured out we have the other Fabio. Here is the other Fabio, the Fabio Zuber. Was working at Siemens, also with the Simple Gang and so on, and hanging around with us from the code team. And happy is here presenting about the new journey he started at the National Test Institute for Cybersecurity.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger, very much for the introduction. I'm really glad to introduce the NTC here at the Siemens Open Source Conference 2025. The Swiss National Test Institute for Cybersecurity is a non-profit startup. We are a small company trying to increase cybersecurity for the Swiss civil society in a bit of an unusual fashion, but more on that later. Many of you might have already seen this T-shirt. It's not just a meme floating around on the internet somewhere. This T-shirt actually exists. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, a coworker, has 3 of these T-shirts at home because he does security research, bug bounty hunting in his spare time. And once upon a time, he discovered an issue in a system belonging to the Dutch government and reported this to the operators, to the National Cybersecurity Center of the Dutch government, and they looked into it, fixed the issues, and then as a reward, after everything is fixed, he got this T-shirt. Even though he didn't get any money, it is still a great way to show appreciation. It is a nice token. In the private sectors, many huge tech companies and banking companies started liking the security research of private people and introduced bug bounty programs or other ways to reward ethical hackings and to introduce channels how one can send them vulnerability reports. But of course, not everybody, not every organization has the capability of running such programs. Financially, or this also needs resources, people that can look into these issues. So not everybody has a chance to look into this. In this sector, where kind of the private market fails, and for important systems here in Switzerland, this is kind of where the NTC tries to fill this gap. We test what is otherwise not tested, so critically important systems for the Swiss civil society we do penetration tests on. As Roger already mentioned, my name is Fabio. For those of you that I didn't get to meet yet, for 2.5 years, I've been a penetration tester at the National Test Institute for Cybersecurity. Before I tried to break code on purpose, I did it by accident working for Siemens as an inner source developer, and the stuff I worked on is now open source as well. We saw the talk yesterday. And I'm also honored to kind of lead the open source initiative now at the NTC. All the topics related to open source I'm kind of involved in. Back to security. Basically, every week we hear something new about the data breach, some kind of vulnerability that was exploited, exposing Swiss citizens' data. This all stems from vulnerable systems. Oftentimes, the vulnerability would have actually been known by the vendors of the software or even the consumer, the people operating these systems, but they weren't really informed properly or didn't prioritize these issues, so they didn't update the systems in time. To kind of prevent this and inform the public, we, from time to time at the NTC, try to bring a bit more transparency. All the vulnerabilities we find, we also report on and publish our findings on our vulnerability hub. For those of you that are brave enough to scan a QR code in a security talk, you might know you might notice that we have also some projects for open source vulnerabilities. there we can go really into details with full proof of concepts, which usually the vendor is totally A-OK, which I find awesome, making it easier to talk about security issues and educate users and other companies dealing with similar issues. Our slogan is, "We test what is otherwise not tested." What we mean with that is we look into solutions where either the vendor doesn't have a security conscious yet, or the people using it do not have the financial resources to do expensive penetration tests. For example, when a municipality wants to get a new software for their school to manage grades and organize stuff, they probably do not have multiple thousand francs in addition to the software they want to acquire to do a penetration test when they introduce a system. So we at the NTC can use public funding to ask around which software is kind of heavily used within Switzerland for the Swiss civil society, and do testing on these kinds of software, which we see as critical. We have a list of criteria in which we determine and prioritize projects we want to look at. We are publicly funded by the canton of Zug, but we are not part of a government organization directly. We are still an independent registered association, also called a Verein in German. Most of our business, like 80% of the projects we do, are done on our own initiative, where we contact vendors, operators of system, where we test, where we want to test something. But in rare cases, we also do customer projects. This is when a special degree of independence is needed. For example, in the past, we did a project together with the National Cybersecurity Center to verify the COVID infrastructure, where we reported some vulnerabilities there, and that it got fixed before the infrastructure and mobile apps were released to the public. When I talk about test, I of course mean technical security analysis, not just checking how the button looks. And typically we also don't send a vendor of a product a questionnaire which they have to describe their processes. We actually test stuff. We do not grant any certificates in any way. We test, we don't certify. Many people here in Switzerland use open source software for their business needs. In a study done last year by CH Open, it was shown that 96% of all companies here in Switzerland use open source software, and almost 50% even classify themselves as heavy open source user. This means that 15 different open source components are used by this company. Everybody here in Switzerland loves to use open source software, but who has the time and resources to maintain this over a long time and also check whether it is secure? This is also shown in this very infamous XKCD comics that I'm sure many of you have already seen before. When we look into an open source project or a piece of software in general, there are kind of two possibilities for this software to be insecure. One of which are vulnerabilities. These are bugs done accidentally by a developer that places a piece of code into software where they didn't think about what the code can also do other than the intended purposes. And these flaws in the logic can then later on be exploited to get access to a system which a person shouldn't have access to, or run code on other people's machines. The other kind of vulnerability or insecurity are backdoors. These are malicious pieces of code placed typically by third parties in a certain libraries to, at a later point, exploit for their own gains. A very famous example last year was the XC utils, which almost compromised all of the internet, but was luckily caught just in time. Some relevant projects we looked at in the open source space, for example, is a tool that is used by various Swiss ISPs, internet service providers, for their internet routing, a BGP management tool that basically tracks which telecommunication operator routes which way to another telecommunications networks area system. And this tool was used by, I think, Init7 and other Swiss ISPs, the peering manager, and we did a code analysis and also found some vulnerabilities we then later reported to the maintainer via GitHub private security advisors, which is a really convenient way for me to contact a project, allowing me to share critical security details in private with the maintainer. And then after everything got fixed, we could even do a CVE through GitHub themselves and a public security advisory. This has the advantage that consumers, users of this product, automatically get an update from GitHub or some bot that a vulnerability was found in this product, and can then take measures like updating their system or do some firewall rule changes beforehand. Of course, we do not claim to know every piece of software out there, everything that is open source and out there. We are always open to ideas. If you have a good idea of a piece of software which you use either for your job in an open source kind of fashion or just here in Switzerland used day by day, please feel free to contact me either via email or the QR code links to my LinkedIn. Feel free to contact me with your ideas. We are always open. The last third of my talk, I'd like to solve security in open source projects forever. No, just kidding. Unfortunately, there is no simple way I can give you how to make your project secure. I have a few bullet points here that we see commonly that are lacking. For example, that there aren't enough resources for maintainers and not enough regular audits, especially. You can't do just one penetration test and then be secure for the rest of all time. And SBOM has been made a buzzword in the last few years. This really helps organizations. Basically, SBOM is a list of all the pieces of software that you use, all the dependencies that a certain piece of software or hardware component uses. And this allows you as an organization, when a common vulnerability gets published, to see which parts of which systems are affected, where do I have to patch something. This really streamlines this experience. Some common issues we find in products, systems, whether they are open source or not, are that often only parts of an application gets looked at, or you get a new fancy new web UI which you want to test and make everything secure. You do a penetration test, but the old Java server page running for 30 years is still publicly accessible with the same access to the same database. So I encourage everyone to always evaluate the entire attack surface. Secure by default has also kind of become a buzzword in the last few years. What I understand for this, or what I find a good solution for this, especially in the open source space for library maintainers, is that you enforce security considerations by default, that you make something secure by default. As an example, if you have a message that gets sent over a network, you have the decision whether you want to encrypt it or not. I encourage everyone to make it encrypted by default, and when a consumer later uses your library, that they can maybe opt out, but they are aware then of this security decision that they are doing. many security bugs get introduced by security decisions that have been done for people which aren't aware that those security decisions have been done somewhere upstream. And of course, CI/CD pipelines can also help with certain problems like automatically detecting vulnerable dependencies and the like. The last thing I want you to take with from my talk is that I often have problem when I reach out to a company actually finding the person responsible for the security of said system or for just in general for a company. To help with this, there is this security.txt standard. It is just a plain TXT file which you place on a well-known directory on your website, on your host, which specifies security contact details. So ethical hackers like me don't have to stalk the company on LinkedIn or send thousands of emails to various email addresses to find a person responsible. In the open source world, in a project, you can also do a similar thing with a security markdown file, for example, stating who one should contact. Or here I have an example from GitHub. Enabling private security advisories has been a great addition to GitHub. I'm sure GitLab can do similar things. It really eases the process of reporting vulnerabilities, and we have great experience using it. With this, I'm at the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I was brave enough to click on the link you provided on the first slide, but I didn't find any information about the size of your organization or the structure of organization. Maybe you can spend some words about it. So how many members do you have, and is it, so you mentioned it's a Verein, so I understand a club. Is it a non-profit, or where this public funding goes to? Is it only hardware and rental, and the rest is enthusiasm, or do you have full-time staffed hackers?
Yeah, multiple questions. I tried to get to them all, but starting first with the financial part. In 2022, I think, we got 7.5 million francs from the canton of Zug to get the company started. With this, we hired the first few people. I mean, I was employee number 3 or so. I'm not part of the founders or stuff. I'm just a penetration tester there. At the moment, we are 5 technical security specialists and some other persons that we use on demand for financial stuff, marketing, and all this stuff. And basically, the 7.5 million francs went into building up an office, building up a team of security specialists. And yeah, we, at the moment, basically are burning this money. We hope to exist for a longer time. At the moment, there are efforts to have this kind of more centrally placed somewhere in the general government. There are efforts running there, but at the moment we are still using the money we got initially from the canton of Zug. As you said, we do not have our testers on our page. This is more to protect kind of our privacy at the moment. Yeah, at the moment we're like 5 people working for the NTC technical specialists. Did I get everything?
Yeah,
thank you.
No more question. So then, thanks a lot, Fabio.